Hello, and welcome back to My Second Life. My name is The Walker. Today I want to guide you into the world of personal budgeting. Learning how to manage your personal finances and budgeting independently of your specific financial situation should definitely be one of your priorities this year. I mean, it should be one of your priorities your whole life, but if you haven't kickstarted the process yet, this year is a good time to get more involved in the world of personal finance. It's complicated to make a thorough video on personal finance. Personal finance is a huge world of advice, different rules and experiences that depend on each one's situation, and it's completely impossible to convey in one simple video. All the recommendations I may give you about the subject based on the main basis as well as what I know and have read about the subject. I think that most of all the purpose of this video is to spark your interest and motivate to research and study more about this subject. Also, before you start diving into the world of Excel spreadsheets and budgeting plans, however, I recommend a more casual approach listening to podcasts like Listen Money Matters, How to Money and The Dave Ramsey Show. There are all great ways to start slowly, getting accustomed to most financial terms and habits. There are many different approaches to personal finance, and I believe there is no correct approach. It all depends on your personal experience, your financial situation, your preferences, your mindset about money, and so on. So first and foremost, I think it's important to take what you hear about personal finance with a grain of salt. And secondly, studying more about personal finance, much like most self-development topics, should be done in a very guilt-free environment. Okay, so usually if you're starting out with personal finance, there are 3 recommended goals. You should prioritize building an emergency fund, starting budgeting and tracking your expenses and getting rid of debt. Regarding this last point, I will link down below some useful resources, videos, and articles for more in-depth analysis. Let's start talking about the emergency fund. This varies between 3 to 6 months of expenses. You need your emergency fund because life is unpredictable and there are sometimes incredibly large and unforeseen expenses that may throw you off balance. For many specialists on personal finance, the emergency fund should be your first goal, if you are started on this path. Also, you should always have your emergency fund fully stocked. That means that if for some reason you need to use your fund, all of your saving priorities for other secondary goals should be dropped to restock the emergency fund. Again, this is the fun part. I have a lot to say about this budgeting and tracking more than specific goals you need to achieve our habits. You should start strengthening and implementing early on. If you're feeling a bit lost as to where your money is going, I highly suggest you to regularly track your expenses. This may seem completely useless at first, since you're probably just either copying your expenses from your banking extract or manually filling in where you spend your pocket money. But more than compiling numbers, tracking your expenses is like scanning your spending habits. You'll find out how regularly you're spending money and where you're able to cut or not. Implementing the habit of just tracking your expenses on a simple Excel or Google spreadsheet every single day is a good way to make sure you're doing this without the overwhelming task of having to do it in a monthly or weekly basis, because those numbers pile up pretty fast. Regarding expense tracking, don't settle only on listing expenses. Going one step further in terms of your analysis of your financial situation can really make a difference in the end. For instance, Make sure you're categorizing your expenses so you can really dig in and see which categories are representing the biggest slice of your budget. Add comments and set reminders to signal which expenses were necessary and which you want to avoid in the future. And signal which expenses represent something you may either reduce or eliminate altogether. Also, take this time to develop the habit of asking questions instead of possibly accepting your expenses. Ask things like, can I live without it? Do I need it? Can I afford it? Can I lower or cut back on this expense? Personal finance can also be a mindful process that helps you prioritize in terms of money management. In this case, what you prioritize in life and what you should cut back on. There are some interesting budgeting rules of thumb that you can experiment with or even implement in case it makes sense for you and your situation. The 50-30-20 rule is a general budgeting rule that's very famous, and it states you should spend 50% of your income for necessities like housing and bills, 30% for wants and personal purchases, and 20% for financial goals like paying off debt or saving for retirement. Another variation of this is the 70-20 teen rule, which recommends you save 70% for your living expenses, 20% for savings of your net salary, and 10% for debt payments. In this case, the recommendation is to pay off the most damaging debt first and then focus on paying off the rest as quickly as possible. Rule 1 states that you should prioritize how you use your money and how independently of how much you earn. As soon as you get your money, you need to decide what to do with it. Each dollar needs to be assigned a job, and then you just have to follow your plan. For instance, if, after paying your bills, debt, and other necessary expenses, you still have $100 remaining in your account, assign each one of those dollars a task. For instance, you may decide that you want to spend no more than $50 dining out that month, $20 on new books, and $30 on new fitness equipment. Big bill prevention rule is used to avoid big payments like an annual car repair or revision, Christmas or birthday gifts, an annual weekend out, etc. once a year. Sum all of those expenses, the money you want to allocate for gifts, regular car or house repair expenses, and divide it by the 12 months of the year. Your goal is to fund those extraordinary expenses monthly. And finally, the 24-10 car loan rule helps clarify how you should allocate your money towards purchasing a car and how basically. It states you should make a 20% down payment that will keep you from owing more than your car is worth with the loan under 4 years. This will help you minimize the amount of interest you pay over the lifetime of your loan. And finally, your car payment should be kept under 10% of your gross monthly income. If you currently have a specific financial goal in mind, you may consider creating accounts for different goals. This, of course, depends on where you live as well as the rules in your country, but there are cases in which you can create an account without having to pay regular commissions. In that situation, it may be a good idea to create a new account for that goal and set up automatic transfers. Each time you get your paycheck, a specific amount will go to that account, and you know that money is untouchable, for example, saving for your wedding. This is an example of how to do it. Created a new bank account. Set up a monthly automatic transfer and never asked for any kind of credit or debit card associated with that account. That money became basically unreachable for regular expenses unless I was transferring the money over to pay the vendors, the catering, and so on. Unfortunately, personal finance is not all about saving and tracking and reducing expenses. Planning correctly for your taxes is also essential. Once again, This completely depends on where you live, but you can probably find a tax calendar available on the internet for your country. Besides organizing your expenses, taking into account your tax bill, you should also make sure you're organizing and tracking the receipts that you can offset against that tax bill. Also, scheduling your bills are due. You can use all different types of software for this as well as the paper planner. If you can try to pay all of your bills on the same day of the month. For instance, if you have 10 bills to pay and they spread out across your monthly calendar schedule to pay the 10 bills on the due date of your first one. Even if you're anticipating your payments, you're paying everything in time and you will avoid thinking about it for an entire month. Finally, implement the habit of regular finance housekeeping. Consider that managing your expenses and the expenses of your family is a draw. The first person I heard mention this was Hannah Witten, and I think she's absolutely right. Tracking, budgeting and remembering when to pay the bills may be something that only one person may have in mind, and it's basically a chore like any other. That change of mindset may allow you to regain some control of your personal finances. Scheduling your plan. These financial housekeeping sessions check your accounts, ensure payments are arriving, file receipts. Check that you're paying your bills and schedule any other payments in advance. I will link down below a couple of Notion templates with expense trackers and other personal finance templates in case you prefer that method. Although I'm a huge believer that you can start learning new things and developing new habits such as personal finance habits any time of the year. January is the type of motivational month that feels perfect for this. Today we talked a lot about budgeting and personal finance, and although anyone can learn how to do this, there are more in-depth skills that you may learn to boost your knowledge.